My name is Chris Mayo. I'm the technical evangelist for the Unified Communications Platform, and together with Chris Schindler, program manager for the Unified Communications Platform, we're going to be talking about Office Communications Server and Exchange platform futures. So specifically building software with OCS 2007 R2 and Exchange 2007. So what we're going to be showing today is OCS 2007 R2. R2 was announced at VoiceCon Amsterdam a couple of weeks ago. Here at the PDC, we're showing the platform side of the R2 platform SDKs for the first time. All these bits are in beta today. We'll talk about when they're going to be shipping early next year and so on. If you're interested in getting into the private beta program, please come and see me or contact me via my blog. You can see my blog URL down at the bottom, blogs.msdn.com. So what I'm going to go through is I'm going to actually walk you through all of the different facets of the R2 platform. And then Chris is going to come up and actually show you v.next. So what we're thinking even after the R2, so shipping one release after R2, what we're thinking about as far as investments and so on, so we can get your feedback about our early thinking on the next version of the platform. So here's what we're going to be covering this morning. First, we'll talk about the solution scenarios for building communications features into your application. So what can you build? Next, we'll talk about how we actually enable those scenarios through the platform. So you can kind of map conceptually, hey, these are the features that I need in my application. How do I actually develop those based on the software infrastructure of OCS 2007 and Exchange, and then with these SDKs? After that, we'll talk about v.next. I'll introduce Chris. Chris will come up and talk about codename Paris, which are some client-side APIs that we're looking at for creating immersive communications clients directly into your applications, either at the control level or the API level or via services. Finally, we'll talk about the roadmap, about what we're shipping when, so you can get a good idea of how you could align your products with our platform. And we'll wrap up with plenty of time for questions. So when we talk about building communications features into your applications, we focus on both the client side and the server side. So for on the client side, we talk about building contextual collaboration apps or applications that enable human-to-human communications. So what can we do within our applications to allow humans to really facilitate the communication and the collaboration they do every day, rather than switching away from our application to a PBX phone or even to Communicator, providing that integrated communications experience. Next, when we start talking about the server side, we talk about business process communications. Or if I have an automated business process that needs to interact with a human, rather than just dumping an email into their inbox, why not use the presence of that person to actually reach out to them via a communication modality like IM or voice, all right, and have the application interact with them with IM, or talk to them and have them talk back to the application. And then finally, we talk about anywhere information access. So if I'm in a meeting and need some information, I can just ping or chat with a back-end service via Communicator and via IM, queries, get a response back, all that conversation being with IM against a back-end service. Or if I'm in an airport and need an update about a project I'm working on, I can do it just with my cell phone. Call into the application, interact with it with voice, it talks back to me, and so on. And we'll see this here in the demo. So let's go ahead and do a quick demo. I'm going to switch over to my demo machine. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk through an end-to-end demo that shows all the different facets that I've just talked about: the contextual collaboration, the business process communication, and the anywhere information access. And the situation that we have here, it's a fictitious company, Contoso. They're a high-end retailer of housewares and furniture and so on. And they've invested in the Unified Communications Platform, the R2 SDKs, both on the client side as well as on the server side. So let's start on the server side scenario. On the client side scenario. This is the mobile point of sale system for the Contoso sales associates that they use on the floor. And it's a WPF application. It's got built-in communications features. And they can use that to help customers as well as be more efficient as employees. So let's look at an example of that. You can see here I'm logged in as Adam Barr in the San Jose store. And if a customer comes in and they're looking for, let's say, a set of wine glasses like these Reno wine glasses, and they're out of stock, if I wanted to find those Reno wine glasses in another store, I could look it up in the inventory system and so on. But if I want to actually, confidently tell the customer, hey, if you drive to another store, those glasses will be sitting there waiting for you, I'd want to call and talk to someone in that store. So rather than me, setting down this really nice application, running on a mobile tablet and walking over to the phone and blindly calling the store to try and find somebody, in another store that has these wine glasses, with integrated communications, I can do it right here from my app. So here you can see, I can see all the different stores that are within this region for Contoso. I can expand the store and get a list of the sales associates, and then also see integrated presence from Communicator directly into the application, right? So I can see that a store associate in Palo Alto, Chris Mayo, is online, and if I wanted to call him, I could launch that call directly from the application just by dragging these wine glasses over on top of his presence icon. And you'll see here, when I go to Chris's application, it takes him, I'll answer the call, it takes me directly to the catalog page for the Reno wine glasses. So there's a couple of interesting things that are going on here. First, integrated presence. So Adam was able to see that Chris was online, and he knew that he could call him and he would pick up, right? So the presence is a very powerful feature on its own. But secondly, the ability to launch the call directly from the application without, setting down the tablet and going and dialing a phone number, or even, panning over to Communicator is powerful as well. But lastly, and I think most importantly, is this call wasn't just a plain phone call between Chris and Adam. It was actually what we call a contextual collaboration session that I had mentioned earlier in the deck. And what it is the application sends, along with the audio communication or the call from Adam to Chris, sends information in the IM channel that my application, since it's communications aware, can interpret and do the right thing. And what it did is it actually put Chris on the catalog page for the Reno wine glasses. So, when I answer this call, I can say, oh, Adam, I see you're calling about the Reno wine glasses. We have 14 in stock. Do you want me to set some aside for the customer? And he can say yes, and I'll go ahead and set those aside. So let's actually flip over and start looking at actually doing some server-side processes here as well, or some back-end business processes. So let's say that Denise comes in, she buys the wine glasses, and also sees a couch that she really likes. She wants to buy the couch. So I'll go ahead and collect some information from her. And since this couch has some lead time and needs to be delivered, we have to schedule a delivery. So what we're actually going to look at is the business process of scheduling deliveries or rescheduling deliveries. So Contoso has this issue or this business process that, if they go out and send a truck out to do deliveries, they want to make sure it's full. So every time a delivery truck goes out with, that's partially full, they're wasting gas, it's a waste of resources and so on. So what they actually want to do is implement a business process such that whenever a delivery is rescheduled or canceled, they can go through and actually reschedule other deliveries that are available onto that truck. And we're actually going to do that with an automated business process that's communications enabled. So let's take a look at that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take schedule delivery for Denise's couch. You can see here that we're going out and getting the current calendar, or the current schedule for all the different trucks. It's actually stored in Exchange, and we'll talk about how we do that in a minute. I can see here that on November 14th from 3 to 5 p.m., there's a slot open, so I'll go ahead and select that one. And then I'll enter Denise's phone number if we need to talk to her. And then here you can see that there's a checkbox that says alert customer if an earlier delivery date becomes available. And my back-end business process will actually use that information. So I'll click submit. And then that delivery is actually scheduled now. I'm going to close the application, and I'm going to open Outlook. And rather than going to my calendar, I'm going to go to the calendar of that Contoso Delivery Truck 1, just so I can show you what happens when I reschedule a delivery. So if I go to calendar, go to that date over the 13th and 14th, you can see here, here's my furniture delivery, right? And this is actually stored in Exchange for a mailbox that corresponds to that truck. And what we've actually got going on here is that through the Exchange APIs, we're actually watching this calendar, this folder for this particular calendar. So if something gets rescheduled or delivered, or rescheduled or canceled, we'll actually kick off a business process running in Windows Workflow that'll start calling customers and ask them if they'd like to get an earlier delivery date. So let's look at that. You can see here the day prior I've got a houseware delivery. Let's delete that. And what's actually going to happen is I've got this phone set up here to ring on that 425-555-1212 number. And the application will call, and let's see what happens.
About an opportunity to move your Contoso delivery to an earlier date or time. Would you like to know more?
Yes.
Okay. Your current delivery is scheduled for Friday, November 14th, 2008 at 3 o'clock p.m. Due to a change in the previous appointment, there is currently an opening on Thursday, November 13th, 2008 at 3 o'clock p.m. Would you like to reschedule your appointment for that time?
Yes.
Thank you. Your delivery has been rescheduled for Thursday, November 13th, 2008 at 3 o'clock p.m. If you have any...
Okay. So a great example of a business process that was made more effective via communication. So rather than a human being blindly calling customers to see if they could reschedule and working out a schedule either in Exchange or on paper or whatever, we've got this business process that watches the calendar of that truck. When something's deleted through the system, as you can see here, it kicks off a Windows workflow that's communications enabled. That workflow starts calling customers through text-to-speech and speech recognition, interacts with the customers, and automatically reschedules that delivery. Right? So a great example of a business process that's made more effective through communications. We also talked about anywhere information access. Let's say that I'm the truck driver and I'm out on the truck and I'm running a little bit early and want to get some information about my delivery schedule and or contact the customer to let them know that I'm going to be running a little early and see if I can go ahead and deliver that couch before the scheduled time. Well, what I can do is, as we had mentioned, the anywhere information access scenario, I can just use my Bluetooth headset and my push-to-talk to call on my cell phone to call into the delivery center and through voice get the information I need or take some sort of action like be connected with the customer. So let's actually do that. I'm going to do it through Communicator just to make the demo a little bit easier. So I'll call into the delivery center.
Hello, welcome to the Contoso Retail Delivery Assistant. Please say your truck number.
So I'm truck number 1.
Okay. Please tell me what you would like to do. Say 1 to provide status on delivery, 2 to contact a customer regarding shipment scheduling, or 3 to talk to someone in the delivery center.
So I'm going to go ahead and contact the customer because I want to see if I can deliver early.
Okay. Please say the 5-digit invoice number so that I can find the customer's contact information.
Okay, so it's 06537.
Good. I have found the customer's phone number and will try to reach them now. Contoso Retail Delivery Assistant. Your delivery professional would like to talk to you regarding your shipment. Would you like to be connected?
Yes.
Thank you. You are now connected.
I'll go ahead and close that before we get a whole bunch of feedback. But what I was able to do, again, an inbound call to a phone number that's actually running a Windows workflow that's communication enabled. It answers the call through text-to-speech, and in this case, DTMF tones. It could also be voice recognition. Interacts with the system to allow me to do different things, like look up information, or in this case, it actually called the customer, asked if they'd like to be connected with the delivery driver, and then bridge the call, those two calls together. And that last section, what we'd actually done is bridge the calls. And I hung up so we didn't get a whole bunch of feedback on our recording and give us early morning headaches. But a great example of both that business process communications as well as the anywhere information access. So let me go ahead and close this down. Let's go back into the slides and learn how we actually develop these kind of systems. So I go back over to the PPTs. And then when we start talking about client-side scenarios, within that Contoso point of sale system, you had seen a couple of different client-side opportunities. One, there was the presence of the user that's signed in, shown in the application, and that's live presence. So if they get into a call or whatever, it'll show them in a call. There was also the presence of all of the different store associates. So when people are communicating with each other, they can actually see, here's Chris, he's online, I know I can talk to him. So when we talk about building these communications clients with the presence, the ability to click to communicate or launch communications directly from the app, as well as that integration of context, that this isn't just a call between Adam and Chris, this is a call about the stock of an item. The SDK that we use to do that is the Office Communicator 2007 R2 SDK. And this SDK actually lets you automate the instance of Communicator running on the local machine. It gives you the ability to embed presence into your applications, the ability to launch communication sessions, whether they're IM, voice, video, they're one-to-one or one-to-many conferences, and integrate that application context so your application can be aware of incoming calls and do the right thing based on the fact that this isn't just a call or an IM conversation. It's something specific to my app. Now this API, we actually use that same API to integrate Communicator into Outlook. So if you've ever seen the presence bubbles in Outlook and use the feature reply with IM or reply with call, that was actually using this SDK. And we also have built some great samples for building applications based off this SDK. If you go up to the Unified Communications Developer Center off of MSDN, which is msdn.microsoft.com/UC, the WPF presence controls, we actually used them in this application. And they work just like the presence bubbles that you see in Communicator, and you can embed them directly into your app. So we also ship it with source code so you can use it to actually learn how to develop applications using the OC 2007 SDK. So let's take a quick look at that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pan over to my laptop here, and let me just show you a quick application. This is an application that uses the WPF presence controls. You can see here I have a control for me as a logged in user. And as I change my presence, it's live. It's picking up the presence from Communicator, right? And same thing for other users. Chris, this is Chris' his laptop over here. If I move the mouse, he goes from online away to online. And here's David Olson. He's a friend of ours that's sitting in the audience here. You can see here I can place calls, I can start video calls, and so on. But I also have access via the OC SDK to automate Communicator directly through code. So you can see here if I click on this Call All button, I can start a video conference just with a few lines of code. So here I am in a video conference. Let's see, you can see here that David's joining the conference. You can see that down at the bottom. So David's not quite in yet. We'll give him a second. Okay. And what I was able to do is I was able to pull the SIP address out of those list controls and use them to drive. Oh, see, there's David. And I'll go ahead and close this so we don't get too much feedback here. But I was able to get some SIP addresses out of those presence controls and just go ahead and use them directly in my application. So if we look at the code for this app, you can see I have a couple of references to it, something called the Communicator API and Communicator Private API, which I use within my application. And then, setting up the controls is just as easy as giving them SIP URIs, right? So Persona 1 SIP URI, giving it Chris's address, and so on. And then when I clicked on that button to create that video conference, it's incredibly straightforward. All I need to do is create a new instance of the Messenger class, which represents Messenger running on my local machine. I'll cast that to another interface so I can get at the communications features. And then I'll go through that persona list to get an array of all the different SIP URIs that I need. And then to start the conversation, I just call Communicator Advanced.Start Conversation. I give it one of the supported modalities like audio, video, IM. Here you can see I was doing a video conference. And since I passed it multiple SIP URIs, it automatically uses the conferencing engine in OCS to start a video conference. So it's incredibly straightforward to use this API. I mean, we've got maybe 10 lines of code here to actually add that communications feature to the application. Because I'm automating Communicator, it's much easier than if I were to write that myself with a SIP stack or even use some of the other APIs that we have in our platform. So the OC SDK is incredibly straightforward, incredibly easy to use. Okay. So some of the other features that we had seen in that Contoso application was the ability to, let's say, watch that calendar for the delivery truck and kick off a process based on changing something in that calendar. Well, this was actually done with Exchange Web Services. Exchange Web Services is the API for doing Exchange work within your systems. And Exchange Web Services is new with 2007. It actually unified all the different APIs we had from Exchange, from WebDAV and CDOX and so on. So you have one API to learn and use in order to access things like the mailbox data, so creating, reading, update, finding, mailbox items, calendar items, tasks, and so on. But EWS also has some really cool features in it, like the notifications feature, where I can actually subscribe to notifications of changes to a particular folder, like when something changes in a calendar or when something gets dumped into the junk folder and so on. There's other services like availability, where you can get the free busy time for individual contacts, or use the availability service to get suggested meeting times based on criteria like how many people are going to be in the meeting and how many you need are required and so on. And other services like synchronization. Now, new in R2 is an API called the Exchange Web Services Managed API, which if you've ever used EWS in the past, you're using proxy classes that are generated by Visual Studio 2005 or 2008, and they feel like proxy classes. They're a little bit cumbersome. The Managed API gives you the same access to EWS features. It's actually using EWS calls or Exchange Web Services calls underneath the covers, but gives you a much more productive, much more intuitive class library like you'd expect from the .NET framework. So let's go ahead and look at an example of that. I'm going to switch over to my demo box. And here I've got a quick application that shows notifications. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and start this application. And what it does is it actually sets up a subscription to the junk mail folder for the local user. So as I dump things into, move things into the junk folder, my application knows about it, right? And I can set up that subscription and tear it down all through code. And that's the same code that we actually used to develop that calendaring feature for the trucks. So let me just minimize this and open Outlook, and I'll go in as my account rather than the truck account. Okay. And what I'll do is in this text box, I'll enter an email address. I'll enter mine, chrism@contoso.com, and I'll say subscribe. And then when I start moving email messages into the junk folder, you'll see that my application is notified of them. Okay? So I'm subscribing to changes, and you can do move events, change events, edits, and so on to individual folders, right? And then when I take down the subscription and move things, nothing will happen, right? So let's take a look at this in code so you can see how this is developed. So if I go up to the top of this solution and expand references, you can see here I'm referencing Microsoft.exchange.data.services. This is that Exchange Web Services Managed API. And you can see as I scroll through the code, I'm using a timer to actually go through and subscribe to different events. In the initialization of my window, I create a new list of type folder ID. This is to actually specify which folder I'm going to watch. You can see here I'm creating a new folder ID called fold ID that is specifying a particular folder. This is a well-known folder named .junkmail. We have all the different well-known folders defined within this enum, but you can also define your own if you have public folders and so on that you'd like to watch. And then I set up a timer in order to do pull timing to actually go to Exchange via EWS Managed API and say, okay, have any events happened since the last time I asked? Okay? So on the button click for subscribing, I go ahead and set up my service reference. So I say service equals new Exchange service, and I give it the version number. So we've got a little bit of future proofing here. I tell it that I'm going to use my default credentials, and then I call AutoDiscover to make sure I go against the right client access server. And then setting up the subscription is just as easy as saying underbar service.subscribe to pull notifications. I give it that list of folders. Right now it's just the junk folder. I give it a timeout, which we set to a minute. I give it a watermark that I can use to actually identify when was the last time I called get events. And then I give it a new event type, which is a type that defines what events that I'm interested in. And you can see here via the event type enum, I'm just going to ask for moved events. So every time I move something into that folder, I was notified about it. Okay? So every time that timer ticks, pull for updates is called, and I'm passed in the state information, which is the actual data about my notification events. So I can, so I'll actually pull for the notification events by saying on my subscription.getEvents, and it batches those up so I can actually scroll through them, so it makes the best use of that network hop. So I can say every notification event in that collection, if the notification is of type moved event, then that's the one that I want to actually put into my UI. And I've got a little bit of UI code to actually put it in that text box. Okay? And then removing the subscription on button unsubscribe click. Just a matter of saying subscription.unsubscribe. Okay? So incredibly straightforward. If you've done EWS code in the past, you know it's much more complex than what we're seeing here. With the EWS Managed API, it's incredibly easy to not only get at the data within the Exchange store for individual users, but also get at those services like subscriptions and notifications that we've seen here, or the availability service for getting free busy time and suggested meeting times and so on. So that's Exchange services. Let's go back to the slides. Next, we had seen a lot of server-side code that enabled communications. So we had seen some calls being bridged, calls being launched, calls that could be received by applications, and so on. This is actually created via the Unified Communications Managed API 2.0. This is a new API. It's a second-generation API within our platform. It's new in R2. And in UCMA 1.0, we provided a great API for creating server-side communications-enabled apps. So it was highly scalable, highly available. It provided all the thread management and connection management to OCS. And it provided really nothing more than a managed code SIP stack. So it did signaling and it did one-to-one IM communication. So I could do broadcast IMs to a number of people. I could provide a contact that looks like a regular contact in someone's communicator, but when they're talking back and forth with that via IM, it's actually a service that's receiving those messages and so on. Well, what we've done, again, based on customer feedback, in UCMA 2.0 is we've added a lot of great new features. So in UCMA 2.0, we now support presence. So we can publish presence of our applications very easily so they show up as being online. We can subscribe to the presence of other users where we will get events when the presence of an individual user changes. So we can do things like, hey, wait for that user to go online. When it goes online, send it an IM or call it and interact with it using voice communications. And we can also do snapshot queries where we can say, okay, for these 10 users, what's their presence in this point in time? We also support voice now within UCMA, so we can manage audio calls, audio conferences, as well as use the speech APIs to do text-to-speech and speech recognition. So this API is a great API for creating communication services or communication solutions like automated call distribution. So you have an application that sits there and waits on a particular phone number or at a particular SIP URI, and when a call comes in, it can interact with them, get enough information so it knows who to transfer the call to, uses presence to say, okay, that person's online, and it can transfer the call. You can create conferencing solutions where you can manage and schedule conference calls, all hosted on OCS. You can create gateways, like Communicator Web Access is a client gateway that provides an AJAX interface to OCS to provide that browser-based communicator experience. You can create your own gateways as well. So let's go ahead and look at an example of this. So what I'm going to do is I'll switch back over to my laptop. Let me close down this application and start up another one. And what I've got here is I've got a UCMA application, and I'll just run it so I can show you what it does. I'm logged in as Chris Mayo on this machine, and you can see that there's a contact here that's offline called the Chris M Lab application. That's actually a SIP URI that represents my application. You can see that it's offline right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start this application. If I go back to Communicator, you'll see that he'll suddenly come online. I'm publishing presence for my application. You can see that there it comes online. So whenever users use that application, they'll see it as being an online contact. So it looks very natural that they're going to communicate with it. What we've got here is we've got a simple application that helps me and my friends go to lunch. Right? And it's a simple application, but it proves a couple of interesting concepts within UCMA 2.0. The ability to publish presence, the ability to launch and manage communications, and the ability to query presence of different users. So what I've got is an application here. So rather than my friends and I actually calling each other every day and saying, hey, do you want to go to lunch? Yeah, let me call Bob. Hey, do you want to go to lunch? Yeah, let me call Sally, and so on. What we can do is we can actually go up to Communicator, and in our presence note, just enter the word lunch. And then we're telling each other that, hey, I want to go to lunch today. And what we'll do is when I interact with this application, I can give it a command to say, put everybody that has lunch in their presence note that is also online, put them in a conference so we can all talk about where we want to go to lunch that day. So it's a great example of doing the querying of presence, manage the communications, and so on. So you can see over on this other machine, I'm logged in as Adam, right, and I'm online. So if I minimize this guy, and you can see that Adam has specified that he does want to go to lunch today. If I start up a conversation with this application and just say lunch, you'll see what it's going to do is it's going to ping back some IM saying finding contacts who have tagged lunch, found one contact, inviting them now. If I switch over to Adam's machine, you can see the little pop-up. And when I answer that pop-up, suddenly I'm in a conference between Chris and Adam and this application, so we can start IMing each other back and forth about where we want to go to lunch. Okay? So it queried the presence of all the different users to say, are they online and do they have the presence node of lunch, and then put us all in a conference. And the same thing applies for voice, since we added that modality. So let me close this. And I'll start up another conversation with the Chris M Lab application. And I'll say, phone lunch. Okay? Finding contacts who have tagged lunch. If I go over here and answer the application, you'll see the next thing that it do is it turns this IM conference into a voice conference. Right? So now I'm in a voice conference. I can say, hey, Adam, where do you want to go to lunch today? You can say, I'm thinking about pizza, and we'll find a pizza place to go to. Okay? And I manage that all through server-side code. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and stop the application, and you'll notice that its presence will go offline. Okay? Let me fire up the application here. And we'll just scroll through just some key lines of code here. There was another session, BB45, that actually walks you through how to develop these particular applications on the R2 SDKs. So you can see here I'm referencing Microsoft.rtc.collaboration, and I have a number of using statements that give me specific access to individual APIs without typing out the whole namespace. So you can get a feel for the API just by reading these. RTC.collaboration, collaboration.audio-video that supports the audio-video modality, collaboration.presence, and so on. Collaboration.conferencing for doing the conferencing. So here you can see that in the instantiation of my application, I have a helper function called publish presence that is referencing a constant that represents publishing online presence. And we left it as XML so you could actually, so we could gain a little bit of flexibility on how we publish presence and so on. But you can see here I'm publishing a value for availability called 3500, which is online. And then I'm just going to register my endpoint, the endpoint that represents my application, just like Communicator is an endpoint or your phone is an endpoint. I'm going to register for incoming calls. I'm going to establish my endpoint. So my application is going to sit listening on that SIP endpoint. And that SIP endpoint could be just a regular SIP URI like myapp@contoso.com, or it could be front-ended via OCS via phone number so it could receive incoming calls. The next thing that I'm doing is, since I've registered myself as being able to accept calls, I've got a method that fires every time a new call comes in based on IM, and it's called instant messaging call received. Once I get that call, I can start hooking up events like flow created. So when the flow of media, in this case IM media coming back and forth, starts, I can actually trap that event and actually process it. And then IM call.state change gives me the ability to know when those calls are disrupted or changed or so on. Okay? So when flow received is called, which is actually the event behind that flow change event, I can sit there and ask, does this conversation have body? So I can distinguish between IM and someone just sitting there and getting SIP messages for typing in the keyboard. So I can say if it starts with, this text body starts with phone, then I know I want to process a phone request. If I go to the definition of this, you'll see here that I'll first send a message, and we're doing everything synchronously here. You'll want to do everything asynchronously in your applications, as we explained in that BB45 session. But here we're doing it synchronously just to make showing the code a lot easier. You can see here I'm just pushing some IM down the wire here through this begin send message. And then to let them know I'm going to find some contacts. And then the next thing that I do is I create an instance of IEnumerable, a generic instance based on remote presentity notification data, which represents the results of doing a presence query against OCS. And that's exactly what I'm doing. On my endpoint, I call remote presence. I call end presence query. And I give it a discussion group, and this is just defined as an array of SIP URIs. I tell it that I want to get the presence note as well as the state of the individual users, and so on. Once I have that query response, I can define a list of strings to represent the URIs of the people that are actually online. And I can populate that just by saying for each remote presentity notification data in my query response, I'll just parse through the XML to find the availability state. And if that person's state availability is between 3,000 and 4499, which is any of the online states, I'm going to put them in my conference. So I'm going to add them to the online matches list. Okay? So the next thing that I need to do is actually start up the conference. So as long as I have something, somebody to put in the conference, I'll create I'll get the conversation, which is the conversation, whether it's an IM call or whether it has IM modality or voice modality and so on. I'll take that conversation and I'll join it into a conference. I'll escalate the actual call to a conference. I'll invite participants. And then I'll add that audio video stream directly to the call. Right? And I do that just by saying create new audio video call. And when I instantiate it, I pass it the actual conversation. That adds that modality to that individual conversation. So it adds an audio-video call to that conversation. And that's how we developed that app that could do publishing of presence. It could do querying of presence. It could create calls or intercept calls or accept calls, and then use those individual calls to escalate them to conferences and so on. And that's the UCMA 2.0 core SDK. Okay, let's switch back to the slides. And one last SDK I wanted to talk about before Chris comes up and talks about the v.next platform is the UCMA 2.0 Windows workflow activities. Now, this is another new API in the R2 platform SDKs. And what it is it's a set of Windows workflow activities that are built on top of UCMA 2.0, the core SDK, that gives you the ability to take any Windows workflow and add communications features to it. So it supports both IM and speech, so speech recognition, text-to-speech, as well as grammar files, the ability to control the communication session, so be able to do, know when a call is placed against your application and start the communication or start the workflow. The ability to know when the call is transferred or put on hold or disconnected. The ability to have the application be presence aware, so it can do things like, hey, for these individual users, tell me who's online, and then I'm going to transfer the call to one of those users. So this is a great API for doing both of these business process communication scenarios we talked about, like doing broadcast IMs or having query response applications either through voice or IM. So let's look at this at a demo. I'll switch over to my demo machine here, and let me open another project. I'm just going to run this application right quick and show you some key activities. So let me just start this application. The demo scenario here is that I've got a Contoso University has an after-hours number that you can call into to be transferred to a teacher to get help with homework. So let me just start this application. And we'll just interact with it very quickly. Okay, so as soon as my application starts, I'm going to right-click on Chris M Lab application. I'm going to call it. And we'll kick off a workflow based off that call.
Hello. Welcome to Contoso University Office Hours Hotline. Do you want to contact an available teacher?
I'll say yes by pressing 1.
Okay, what is your student ID number?
Oddly enough, my ID number is 12345. It's easy enough to remember.
Sorry, but no teachers are available at this time.
Okay, so it actually didn't
Please call
transfer
back
the call.
later. Goodbye.
And the reason why it didn't transfer the call is because Chris is shown in an away state. So let me go, I'm sorry, Adam. So let me go back over to Adam's machine and jiggle the mouse. So it actually shows him as being in an online state, and let's call the application again. Again, the application is presence aware. So it couldn't transfer the call because there was no teachers available.
Welcome to Contoso University Office Hours Hotline. Do you want to contact an available teacher? Okay, what is your student ID number? A teacher is available to help you. I'll transfer you to that teacher now.
You can see the application transfers the call. If I go over to Adam's machine, you can see that not only can I see the call coming in, but you can see that it was transferred by that application. Okay? So now I'm in the call. So this is a great example of a Windows workflow that's communications enabled. So let me stop this application, and while that's tearing itself down, a couple things that I wanted to mention. So we do support text-to-speech and speech recognition. For the sake of the demo, we're actually just using DTMF tones because we're actually running this in a terminal services environment, so we don't have the ability to pick up the local mic on the machine. But we support DTMF as well as speech recognition and grammar files. We support IM as well as speech. And just a quick tour of these workflow activities. When I show the presence folder, I'm sorry, the toolbox, you can see that I have all sorts of activities for making statements, asking questions, getting presence, and so on. And I've built my application using those activities. Here's the activity that actually accepts the call, so I'm listening on a either phone number or SIP URI or both. I can read statements like, hello, welcome to Contoso University, and this can either be professionally recorded WAV files we play on the call, or it can be the text-to-speech engine that we had heard. I can ask questions and accept answers based on the grammar files I define. So if they say yeah, yup, yes ma'am, I know that they mean yes, and I can use that to follow the flow of my application through these if-else branches. And I can use activities like the get presence activity to get a collection, based on a number of SIP targets, get the presence of those individual targets to say, okay, tell me which ones are online. I'm going to use an algorithm to figure out which one I'm going to transfer the call to. Okay? So that's UCMA 2.0, the workflow activities. And again, it provides you the power of UCMA 2.0 in your applications, so the ability to do presence, communications management, IM, and speech applications, but gives it to you in a much easier to design and develop paradigm of Windows workflow. So when we look at the different solution scenarios, it's pretty easy to see that for contextual collaboration, integrating presence, click to communicate, and contextual conversations, the OC SDK is the right SDK to use for adding those communications features to the client. You can also use Exchange Web Services to have Exchange data integrated into your app. For business process communication and anywhere information access, you really want to use UCMA 2.0 for the underlying communications scenarios for being able to do call transfers and being able to do consultative transfers and manage calls and so on. And you can also use this UCMA Windows workflow activities as an extraction layer to do a lot of the heavy lifting in your applications and then shell down into UCMA 2.0 when you need a little bit more power or control, either through code activities or through custom activities. And again, Exchange Web Services, the managed API, not only works on a client, but it works on the server, and we saw that in our application, being able to have notifications that are fired off on the server side to kick off our UCMA workflows. Okay, so that's R2. I'm going to ask Chris to come up here, and he's going to walk you through v.next and some of the investments that we're thinking about after the R2 release. So Chris, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Morning, everyone. So I am here to chat about what we're going to be doing next and some of the thinking that we have right now. And I just want to up front say this is a great time to come give us feedback in the booth or chat with us, here after the session, because we're very much in the planning stages. So Chris has done a great job of talking about the server-side investments and the client development investments that we've made in the R2 release. When we sat down and asked customers, where do we want to head next? What are the next set of investments that we should be making? We talked about embedding communications within applications. They said, you've got a great middle-tier story. You've got a great platform in OCS. What I want to do is I now want to take communications abilities, like you've just seen, and I want to put them inside of the application that my users use every single day. So the round of investments that we're looking at is to be able to create those immersive communication experiences. And we've identified 3 goals or 3 investments to create those immersive applications. Number 1, we're looking at creating a set of communication controls in WPF and Silverlight so that you can integrate communications directly into your new and existing applications using those presentation controls. 2, we're looking at revving the R2 SDK that Chris has been talking about on the client side, and having a consistent API model across several different flavors. So having it available in COM, having it available in .NET, as well as Silverlight, so that your learning curve is much lower depending on whichever flavor you wish to use. So you have to learn one model, and then you can apply it in a number of different situations. And then 3, we're looking at service-oriented architecture services to enable cross-platform scenarios and loosely coupled architectures as well. So you can use the web services to take, for instance, communication into your Java application or something like that. So I want to talk for a few minutes a little bit more about what we mean by immersive applications. And to do that, I'm going to talk about an application that my team has been building over the last year. A year ago, we sat down with the Dynamics CRM team and said, we're interested in this unified communications plus line of business application space. Let's go incubate something together and actually create a product to find out what are the right experiences for our customers as we look forward to our platform investments. So what we've done actually is focused on the customer service representative role within Dynamics CRM. There's someone who spends a lot of time communicating. So efficiency matters a great deal. They also have a big influence on customer service. So if we can help them create a better customer service for their customers, then we help businesses do a much better job of addressing their customers' needs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my demo box. Now I kind of want to show you the installation experience here, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of that instance. I'm waiting for IE to respond here. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and start a new instance, and hopefully this will tear itself down while we get started here. So I am going to just go back to my URL. Now this is a URL that's hosted on a CRM server. So the application actually installs into Dynamics CRM. What you can see here is a WPF application downloading using the Click Once capability in .NET. So it's now integrated inside of CRM. And it's also signing in as an Office Communicator endpoint. So everything that I need to be an endpoint within OCS is now downloaded and installed into my CRM application. So continue with the scenario here just for a moment. I actually have my cell phone up here with me. And I am going to call into this application using my cell phone. And what's going to happen here is that you're going to see in the lower right-hand corner a toast show up. That toast is based upon my phone number from my cell phone, and it's already recognized who it is. So I just click on Accept here. As the agent, I can already see that it's Jonathan Farmer calling. And as I answer the call, and I say, hello Jonathan, how can I help you? I can also see Jonathan's information here using the CRM forms. So I could take a look at information. I could take a look at past cases for Jonathan. So I have all the information right here to begin to address Jonathan's needs. We've also created a phone activity here, so we're automatically tracking the communication within CRM. So we've made it really easy. We've made the agent already more efficient by integrating the communications inside of CRM. To that point, you'll notice over here on the left-hand side, this is where I manage my conversations. I can place the customer on hold. I could transfer the customer to someone else. And you notice that we sort by presence, so it's very quick and easy for me to do that transfer. I could conference someone in. So here we're getting to the customer service aspect of this immersive application that we've written. If I want to reach out to an expert within the back office, we've made this really, really simple. One, to find that expert, I could search up here. But two, I can also see their presence, so I can quickly find a group of people or see the people that I could actually conference in to have a discussion with this customer. So I'm not hemming and hawing on the phone with the customer anymore. I'm saying, you know what? Let me pull in the product designer from our group, and we can have the discussion right here. Of course, I could also end the call. We've talked about conferencing. We also have a consultation is another way to reach experts within the back office. So here, just to quickly show you, I am going to consult with someone, and I'm just going to pick someone here. I'm just going to pick Clint. Now I have an IM channel open, and I'm actually not going to IM Clint because he's not expecting to hear from me this morning, but I could actually start an IM conversation in parallel with my customer conversation. So I could be asking Clint questions and answering the customer's questions as well. And of course, you can imagine that I could then just pull Clint straight into a conference with the customer. So a quick little demo. A little bit about how we did this. As I mentioned, this is a WPF application running inside of the CRM instance. So everything that you see here over on the left for conversation management is in WPF, as well as these buttons here and the tabs up here are all WPF inside of CRM. We deploy using the Click Once technology. As part of that deployment, you might notice down here in my taskbar, there is no Office Communicator running. So I don't require Office Communicator to be installed on my agent desktop. This is different from what Chris was talking about in R2, because in R2 we have an automation API which allows us to access Communicator and actually launch Communicator and do some things. With the next set of APIs that we're talking about and thinking for the next release, all that information is brought down automatically, so you don't have to have Communicator running. So this is an example of the type of immersive application scenarios that we're looking at enabling in our vNext. So let's break it down a little bit. Over here on the left-hand side of the screen, we have a series of large controls that you could drag and drop into your application. So a contact card control, an authentication control, a contact list, a conversation, a toast. we think of those as big unit controls that you could pull into your application. We also think of them in breaking them out into finer grained controls. So these controls may not be exactly what you need for your line of business application or your intranet application or something like that. So we're going to break these into finer grained controls so that you can drag small bits into your application and build the experience that you'd be looking for. So for example, if you look at the conversation window there, you'll see a little conferencing icon. That might be one conferencing control that's available to you. You can pull that directly in your application, click on it, and then have a conferencing experience right from within the application. So over on the right-hand side, we talk about the different support levels for WPF and Silverlight. The interesting thing about Silverlight, of course, is because it's now into a cross-platform scenario, we may have some partial support for voice, video, and some of the other modes that you see there. I say partial because there are two different ways that you could tackle enabling those different modalities. The first way is we might ask you to install an ActiveX controller or something similar so that you can gain access to the media stack. The second way that you could do it is you could actually, for instance, I could have an IM with through Silverlight, and I could ask OCS to call me. So if I had a customer calling in, I could see a notification of the call. I might type back to OCS, please connect me with this customer on my cell phone. Right? Then OCS would call my cell phone and would conference me in with the customer. So there are a couple different ways that you could enable those modalities. So that's the Silverlight and WPF controls. And what I wanted to quickly do is, you've seen an application inside of WPF in a browser. I just thought it might be fun to show an application within Silverlight. And a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with a customer, and we were talking about the Paris investments here. And they said, it'd be great. I love all the controls. I love the flexibility. I love that I can control the design within these resources. It'd be really great if you gave me a reference application that I could just take, and then I could take out what I don't need and put into my application. So I said, that's an interesting demo. So what I've done here is just put together a quick web page. This could be an intranet site. This is based on ASP.NET. And what I've done here now, you can see over here on the lower right-hand corner, I've actually created a Silverlight control host. And I've just embedded a Silverlight object within my ASP application. If I scroll over here to the right, you can see here's the actual reference to my application. Where'd it go? There it is, right here. Let me see if I can highlight that for you. Okay, so this is a reference to my XAML application. That actually references a page called page.xaml. What I want to show here is that this is the entire page. This is the base page, if you will, of my Silverlight application. And to get this experience, all I had to do was put one tag in place, and that is the application state control tag. This controls whether or not the user is signed in. If they're successfully signed in, then we show the signed page XAML file. And I'm not going to go through this entire file because it's fairly large with all the different applications of presentation and controlling stack panels and so on. But I wanted to call out the specific control here. And this is how we added a conversation control into the Silverlight application. So this is how, when authoring, this is how you would add the different presentation controls that we were just showing you. So I'm going to go ahead and fire this application up. While it builds, all right. So you see here the ASP application, and then I have Silverlight down below. I'm just going to go ahead and sign in. And again, this is all in a full Silverlight application. This is all Silverlight. This isn't WPF like you just saw in the CRM example. I can start, and I just have I could start a conversation with Carlene here, and I could start IM right from within my ASP application. So this is a nice, easy example of how we might put Silverlight into an existing line of business application. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back out of this and get back to my slides. So let's talk for a little bit about the APIs the API investments that we're making in our vNext. Today we've talked about the R2 SDK, so we have a nice set of APIs. They're somewhat complex, especially as you get to the Unified Communications API. They're complex but powerful. In the next set of investments that we're making, based upon the customers' conversations we've had, is the Paris Client 2.0 API, again across the different flavors, COM, .NET, and Silverlight. What I thought would be interesting then is to show what that model might look like, what we're thinking about for the Paris model. Here UC Client is my base class, and I have two groups of functionality available to me. One is contacts and groups. That's where I can see who my contacts are, manage people as my contacts. So here I have groups. I can create custom groups. I can get my standard groups down from OCS. I can also automatically subscribe to my group, so I'd automatically get presence. And of course, in each one of those, then I have a contact where I'd find my contact card, information from Exchange, and so on. Over on the right-hand side, then I have my conversations manager. And of course, the manager, manages all my group of conversations. I could have from 0 to as many as I want. And those are represented then by conversation. Within the conversation, I have two different areas here, and it may be a little bit small, and I apologize if it is. One is we think about the conversation mode. So up here on the right-hand side, I have modality actions tied to each available mode. So I have IM, audio, video. I could do app sharing. I could do content sharing. This is where my actions are stored. Down below, then I have my participants that are part of each conversation, and that includes myself, so local participant, but also 0 through, let's say there are 9 other participants in a conversation. So now I can go down to that level and I can find out the participant state for each participant. Are they connecting? Are they connected? What modes are available to them, so that if I make an invite, I can appropriately return some information to my screen. So if you can imagine that I'm an ERP application, I'm going to integrate this managed API into my application. I'm going to call UC Client. I'm going to call Conversations Manager, get that going, and then when a user says, I need a new conversation, we're going to add it to the Conversations Manager collection, and we're going to get them started. What's also not clear here, but it might be possible, is that I could have multiple branch conversations as parent-child relationships. Both, I could have multiple conversations, but I could have a conversation within a conversation. So you could imagine a conferencing scenario. We have a big live meeting going on, but I want to have a smaller conversation down here on the side, but I still want to have all those capabilities available to me. Content sharing, app sharing, private discussions with those people just in those child conferences. So I wanted to show a little bit about how we're trying to take the API and make it simpler and make it easier, more powerful to use just straight out of the box, if you will. So what I have here is I just have a quick sign-in method in sample code. And after I've created my application and initialized it, I execute a sign-in. As you can see, we saw earlier, I could apply some settings to that sign-in, like maybe what's my presence, if I wanted to actually explicitly set presence. So I could do some quick things, but it's a very simple little method there. What's interesting, though, and where we've worked really hard is what do I get when I sign in? Today, if you sign in, you just get the endpoint set up, and you need to go off and do a whole bunch of other things. In the future, what you get when you sign in is endpoint registration, you get your presence published, you get your Exchange integration automatically, phone integration automatically. We'll sync your address book for you automatically. We'll publish your capabilities. So if you don't have video available, we'll tell everyone else that you don't have video available. And then we'll also go grab all your contacts and groups. So with one sign-in method, I can pull down a bunch of information that you can now access. So we've made it much simpler, much easier to use the APIs. The third plank that we're thinking about for Paris is the SOA services for communications. And I just have a quick little quasi-architectural slide here to show Office Communication Server here at the bottom. Then above that, we have two classes of web services. One, we have a Communicator web service, which replicates the capability of Communicator at the middle tier. Right? So it carries all the state. If I want to get contacts, I go back to the Communicator service. I can grab my contacts, bring it back to my UI. We're also looking at a set of third-party web services so that I could have some application, be it maybe a server-side application or some client application, actually contact that service not as an endpoint, so not as a user, but as just a service that needs information from OCS. So you could imagine that I'm an application and I just need to get information about people's presence, but I don't want to do that as an endpoint. So I don't want calls to be routed to me or show up with my own presence. I just need to get a bunch of information about people in my groups. So you might do that through the third-party web services. Then, of course, on top there in the red would be the different types of scenarios that you can enable with these SOA services. So I'm a Java client, or I need to do a server-side mashup before I send it to my eventual line of business application, of course, ASP.NET. Another scenario here is that I am... So how might I use these in a scenario? I could be, for instance, another ERP provider, and I have my own UI, let's say written in Java. And I want to integrate communicator functionality. I can come straight to these web services and quickly start to add communications from OCS into my Java client through this, but being able to do it nice and easily and keeping all the state on the middle tier so I don't have to worry about that within my application. So at the end of the day, what I hope you take away from this discussion is that Paris is about putting communications inside of your applications. We want to help you create those immersive applications so that your users don't have to be context switching between different clients to get their communications, so that they can have context shared within those communications. So that if I'm managing a purchase order and I need to contact someone about that purchase order, you could imagine a scenario where when I make that contact, they see the exact same screen automatically that I'm looking at, and we could do a little bit of content sharing there and say, okay, this is what I'm really talking about. So we're at the booth. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are. This is a great time to come give us feedback about Paris and where we're headed. I want to ask Chris to come back up on stage, and thank you for your time.
Cool. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks. So there we go. So we wanted to provide you a roadmap so you know what we're going to be shipping when. Again, so as we have conversations about scenarios that you're looking to enable and so on, you know what to expect and you can kind of plan accordingly. So OCS 2007, our current release, was released back in November of 2007, and the wave 1 of the platform SDKs were released along with that. So this next release we're calling R2, and it includes not only Office Communication Server 2007 R2 and Communicator 2007 R2, but also these R2 platform SDKs. It's in a private beta right now. If you're interested in that beta, please contact me via my blog or stop by and see me in the booth. And this particular beta includes all of the SDKs we've talked about today. So the Communicator SDK, Exchange Web Services, the new Managed API, UCMA 2.0, UCMA 2.0 workflow activities. And then in February of this year is when we're actually going to release this, and we'll have launch events and start being able to show this content, more of this APIs and more samples and so on publicly. And what Chris talked about as far as the v.next platform, that's coming later in 2010. And again, this was something where we wanted to show it, start the discussion about these APIs, get your feedback, so we can start kind of getting feedback and integrating that to make sure that we're shipping the APIs you need to create these immersive communications clients. So R2, a lot of great investments in UCMA as far as doing server-side stuff. v.next is going to be about client-side. So today we wanted to walk you through the value that you can add to your software via communications features. And in specific, we talked about contextual collaboration, so enabling that human-to-human communications in our apps, the integration of presence, the integration of communications launched directly from your application, and then that context integration. So, it's not just a call between two people, it's a call that's specific to your application. We also talked about communications-enabled business processes, or the ability of taking a business process that's automated and making it even more efficient by using communications to reach out to human stakeholders when and where appropriate, based on presence, based on the right modality. And then finally, anywhere information access. So as a mobile user, if I'm sitting in a meeting, I need some information, I can get it very quickly through IM, or if I'm walking around in the PDC or in the airport on the way home, I need to get some information, I can call an application and actually interact with it through voice. All these things are enabled through this platform. So the R2 Platform SDKs provides that ability to create that client application with the OC 2007 R2 SDK, the ability to interact with Exchange very efficiently with the EWS Managed API, and then that server-side investment, the big changes that we're making in the R2 timeframe is UCMA 2.0, the core SDK for managing communications on the services side, or on the server side, and then UCMA 2.0 Windows workflow activities, which, again, as an abstraction layer, lets you create these very powerful communications apps very quickly. Again, presence-enabled, IM, speech. And then Chris walked through what we're going to be doing in v.next, and v.next is all about that client investment. So the Paris APIs with the Paris controls for creating drag and drop communications experiences directly into your app rather than having communicator running next to your application. The classes, so you can create your own controls or your own UI experience via code running behind your UI, and then finally these Paris services. So if you're in a SOA architecture or software plus services, the ability to loosely coupled from other platforms gain access to these communications features that are running in OCS 2007. Okay, so that's the platform features. At the PDC, we have recordings of all these sessions. So if you look for codes BB09, BB45 for getting a deep dive into UCMA, BB46 for getting a deep dive in the Exchange Web Services API. We also have a booth. I know this is the final day of the PDC, but stop by. We could talk in more detail about these solutions and show you the code that we use to create them. And then we've also got some hands-on labs here at the PDC. And again, all the PDC sessions are recorded, so if you want to go and watch these at your leisure, check out the recording, contact me. I'm cmayo@microsoft.com if you have any questions. I'd love to talk to you about anything you see in these sessions. Also, we have, besides the beta program that I talked about, every PDC attendee is going to walk away with the same VPCs that we showed in these demos. In order to get those VPCs, you need to email us at ucvpc@microsoft.com, and we'll set up a Connect site where you'll be able to post PDC, download these VPCs, or have them shipped to you if you desire. Well, thanks very much. That is Office Communications Server 2007 and Exchange 2007 from the platform perspective. So thanks very much. I really appreciate you stopping by and joining us for the session, and I hope you have a fantastic PDC. Thanks. Thank you. So we've actually run out of time for questions, so probably the best thing to do, to be fair to the next speaker, Chris and I are going to tear down our demo environment. If you guys want to come down to the booth, we'll come down to the booth as soon as we're done tearing this all down, and we'd love to ask your questions or answer your questions. And David is from the platform team as well. He's in the back. Chris could also answer those, but in 30 minutes, someone else is going to show up here, and they're going to expect these 4 laptops, router, phones, voice gateways, and all that stuff to be torn down. So I'll go ahead and get that done, and then I'll come and meet you guys in the booth to answer any questions that you have. Or you can ping Chris or David, and they can answer them as well. So thanks again. So the booth is down in the Platform Center. It's blue sign says Unified Communications. You can pretty much hear a phone constantly ringing right next to it. So thanks, everybody.